Obviously in the middle rounds too, like we talked about, it's important to develop your team the right way. And I think a miss in the middle rounds, a lot of people are worried about like who do I draft in the first round and do I hit on my first pick? I think a 3 or 4 misses in the middle rounds can absolutely, hamper your team. And I don't think it's the end of the world either way, but there are players that I'm like, I'm probably not drafting in this range because I think they can hurt my team, especially as you're building out the back part of your lineup. So as we come into these middle rounds and we're talking fades, Tyler, who's at the top of your list when it comes to players you're fading in this range?
So I think for me and you, we kind of look at fantasy a little differently.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm all about the upside. Like I don't care about a floor. I don't worry about any of that. I don't care. I want every single pick. I'm just trying to hit the home run. It's either home run or strikeout, and I'm okay with that. So a guy that I just will not draft, I'm not interested, is Devin Singletary. And people will say with Devin Singletary, like, oh, he's a pretty safe running back. He'll probably be a solid, RB3 for you. I don't care about that. I'm not looking for an RB3 because the chances are you're going to be able to find an RB3 on the waivers at some point during the season, probably multiple points during the season. What you're looking for, in my opinion, in these later rounds, especially once it gets to middle rounds, mid to late, like the middle late rounds, like round 9, 8, is you're looking for the ultimate ceiling plays, in my opinion. You're looking for the Devon Achans of last year. You're looking for those type of guys. And to me, Devin Singletary's best finish has been RB20 on one of the best. Actually, I think the Bills were their top 3 in scoring that year, that he finished 20th as RB20. So now he's going to the New York Giants. Do we really think like there's a chance that the Giants offense could be decent? I don't think it's going to be good. I think the hope is middle of the pack, but there's also a chance that it could be bottom 20 in scoring. So we really think that Devin Singletary going to a much worse offense than what he's ever been a part of. He's an okay running back, but he's not spectacular by any means. It's going to be like anything more than an RB2. Like he could be an RB2, mid RB2, back in RB2, which is fine. But I'm looking for the ultimate ceiling guys. I'm looking for the upside. So he's a guy that I have no interest in whatsoever in drafting.
I'm not mad at it, and he's not one of the sexy names, right? But I think that he provides value as like a flex option, right? Like I think when you get to these middle rounds too, it's tough because you want to get players with upside, but who's to say that Devin Singletary doesn't have upside as a starter? So it depends on your classification of upside. And I think what you're talking about is guys who can potentially be top 12 at their position, guys that can significantly outplay it and maybe not go from RB3 to RB2 in the rankings. But I think Devin Singletary is a guy, especially if you faded the running back position early. I don't mind him there, but I get what you're talking about as far as like having a cap ceiling. There ain't a whole lot of ceiling there for him. One of the players that I am fading in this round is a very popular name, especially in the fantasy football community, because he's a rookie. But he is coming off of an injury, and that's Jonathan Brooks for the Carolina Panthers. A lot of people are excited about Jonathan Brooks and think he could be this year's Todd Gurley. We hear it all the time, this year's player X. And I get the excitement for a guy, he probably would have been a first-round back had he not had the ACL injury. Going to Carolina, playing under Brian Canellis, I think this is a player who will be good and will be a very valuable piece for this team down the line. It's just he's going way too early right now. Top 25 running back. And I think everybody's chasing the upside, chasing what if he does this in the fantasy playoffs? What if he does have a top 12 finish? He's still got a guy that he has to beat out in Chuba Hubbard. And I'm not saying Chuba Hubbard is elite by any means, but he's serviceable and he's earned the respect of his coaching staff. So to go 3 to 4 weeks, which Jonathan Brooks is expected to be out for 3 to 4 weeks, to go that amount of time as a starter, we're probably going to need to see a workup in ramp up in carries over the next 3 to 4 weeks for Jonathan Brooks. There's a possibility that we're not seeing anywhere near starters touches at least until week 10 or 12. And now you talk about that. He has to actually take over the starting workload and be the full workhorse back and have Chuba Hubbard just be the change of pace back, which I'm not sure in his rookie year that's going to happen. This is already not a great football team. They're going to have to go through some growing pains this year offensively. You talked about that with the Giants and Devin Singletary. I'm not even sure how many touchdowns this Carolina Panthers team scores. I think they'll be a little bit better offensively. But to take Jonathan Brooks as a top 25 back over some more entrenched starters, some guys with similar upside that are not injured, that do have a clear path to a starting role, I'm out on Jonathan Brooks where he's going right now.
I like Jonathan Brooks.
I know you do. I know you do.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, and what's nice about Jonathan Brooks, I do think that he'll continue. Like I've already seen him fall in drafts, so I think that he'll fall a little bit. And for me, like he's kind of getting to that Devin Singletary range where it's like Devin Singletary or Jonathan Brooks. I'd rather take the unknown, even if he ends up not being that great year one because of the injury. I'd rather take the uncertainty. And you can also just store him. What's probably going to happen with him, I'd imagine he's going to go on pup. So you're going to be able to just start him right away on your IR spot. And then that first 2 weeks, when there's a lot of really good players to be picking up, you don't have to have a roster clogger that you're kind of waiting for. You can just store him there. So I like him in that sense, and I do think that later in the season he can break out. But a guy that I'm fading, and I'm not gonna. It's not really a guy. There's just multiple guys in this range that I'm kind of fading. Like I really like to go with Kyler because I think Kyler has QB1 overall upside.
Shout out
So
to the jersey.
yeah, shout out to the jersey. Let's go. But there's like, I'm not a fan, and I've seen this happen before, and I'm just not a fan. I don't like taking Dak in this range. I don't like taking Jordan Love. And the reason being is if you're sitting there in like round 7, I still think that there's some really quality players left on the board. And I wouldn't be going a quarterback even in like round 8. I still think that there's some really quality players there where I don't see a big difference between Dak Prescott. And I know he had a very good year last year, but what happens a lot with these guys is they typically regress slightly. He has I don't want to say a down year, but not as big of a year as he had last year. Even Jordan Love, who played fantastic, could maybe even grow again. But who's to say like a guy like Trevor Lawrence can't get close to those guys in terms of points? So like I'd rather, and the other thing is these guys don't run the football, and I'm just a big believer in having quarterbacks that run the football. So like, what's the difference between those guys and also the potential upside that a guy like Jaden Daniels offers? A guy like even I know he's a rookie quarterback, but Caleb Williams, the best quarterback prospect we've seen maybe ever. People like to throw that shit out. So I just don't like to take these quarterbacks when there's a guy, you really like Calvin Ridley. And I think that Calvin Ridley has some upside. Even a guy like Deontay Johnson, a guy like, Najee Harris or, whatever running back. So for me personally, how I like to build out my rosters, it's not that I rarely draft these guys for where they're currently going. Anytime in the 7th, I'm totally out. Even like 8th, I wouldn't even take him. Maybe 9th round, we're starting to talk, but like just in these middle rounds, I don't like to take them.
Middle round quarterbacks is tough because you feel like you got to kind of reach. You're almost just drafting because you need a quarterback at that time, as opposed to like continuing to build.
People fill out their roster, and I don't think that you should have to fill out your roster. Like continue to draft the running backs and wide receivers.
I'm with you on that, man, and I feel like it's even tempting sometimes. I've done a couple mock drafts where even guys like CJ Stroud sometimes will fall, or like you mentioned, Kyler or Dak will fall, and it's tempting to take a quarterback there, but there is a lot of good talent still in those rounds. Another player that I am fading though, and this is kind of a theme I think for me, is some of these running backs that I feel like that I think they're just going a little too early. It's not that I don't like the player. I just think that we're not always recognizing the situations. So I talked about Jonathan Brooks. We're not recognizing the injury situation. I think we're not recognizing the changing of the guard that happened last year in Detroit for the Lions. And David Montgomery is a player that I'm not taking here in these rounds, man. He's going as a top 20 running back right now. And what's carrying that value? All of the stuff that he did early last season while Jahmyr Gibbs was trying to prove himself. Down the stretch, David Montgomery was a very, very touchdown or bust type commodity to have on your team. And I don't think people realized it because he did score a lot of touchdowns. I think he's going to be involved still in this offense, and especially with Jahmyr Gibbs potentially being slower to start the season, dealing with an injury right now. His status in week 1 looks like he's good to go, but could be in jeopardy. But David Montgomery is the kind of player now who we've got to understand that this team drafted Jahmyr Gibbs early to be the guy. And they used him consistently down the stretch in the red zone. After David Montgomery even came back from his injury, Jahmyr Gibbs was still being frequently used in the red zone, which wasn't the case early on. So lower red zone usage, obviously not as much involvement in the passing game. And so he's super reliant on, can he get to 70 to 100 yards and can he score a touchdown? And if that doesn't happen, Dave Montgomery is going to hurt a lot of teams as your RB2. Sometimes if you fade the position and you go with him as your RB1, now you're dependent a lot on a guy that has to score a touchdown and really in order to be a double-digit guy. So I'm out on David Montgomery at the ADP. If he was going a little bit lower, maybe I'd consider him. But I think this is an ADP thing we haven't adjusted to. David Montgomery probably is going to be for this 2024 season.
No, I agree with that. The only kind of thing is I would say, Gibbs' injury is the only thing. But I do think that honestly what's going to happen, I've already kind of seen in mocks. I was doing mocks late last night, is Montgomery's creeping up. And I think that that's going to continue where he's honestly probably going to be a 5th round pick now. And I think that there's still some, I agree 100%. If Jahmyr Gibbs did not get hurt, Dave Montgomery is one of those guys that's just, he's a very low ceiling player. The only way he reaches his ceiling if Jahmyr Gibbs gets hurt, but that you're talking about a handcuff and a handcuff that you're basically drafting in the 6th round. Yeah, I agree 100% there with you. And I also think like people don't realize what Jahmyr Gibbs was doing at the end of last season. Dave Montgomery is just purely a red zone back, early down grinder. And if you have Jahmyr Gibbs only continue to eat into that red zone work, there's no value here with Dave Montgomery. Yeah. So I agree.
It's tough, and you're taking them alongside, like I said, some really good starting options. I think late in those middle rounds
that have higher ceilings,
better floors. Like
to
me, David Montgomery, that pick does not make sense. I think he's just a name the fantasy community saw, last year, right? You kind of get, I think that's a trend, right? Where you see people from last year that surprise you. You're like, oh, I don't want to get caught missing on them again. Or you have people that don't do well, and you're like, I'm not going to let them burn me this year. And I think it's a very flawed philosophy, man.
Yeah. It happens all the time. I mean, you see it with look at Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence going like round 13. He was a 5th round pick last year.
Yeah. Last year, he was everybody's favorite to enter the top 5 last year. So.